and start our recording. So, like any human venture, fundraising is about relationship. We don't just ask for money from our congregants and our members. We ask them to join us in the ministry that we're doing. We ask them to form relationship with each other and with our ministries. And so I put this as the very beginning of our conversation because I want us to remember that stewardship isn't just about numbers. It's about people. It's about the community. It's about the ministry that we engage in. It's about the work that we do together. So as we move through this and as you move into your stewardship season, remember that this is about people, and our conversations about money are also conversations about people's lives. So a few basic best practices around staying in good relationship with members of your congregation around stewardship. That would be frequent and genuine communication. So if you are a congregation that does a weekly newsletter, please keep doing it, and especially during stewardship season, let people know how they can get involved and let people know what the needs of the congregation are. The more frequent and the more genuine it is, the more people feel included in your conversation. We should always be teaching and learning about money and meaning. So this isn't just about show me the money. This isn't just about increase your pledge. This is about learning why our gifts are related to our faith and our journey, and why the congregation is using our time, talent, and treasure and asking us to pledge it. We're going to talk later about making a clear and concise case for giving. Your case for giving should talk about your mission. It should talk about what you're excited about, why people come to your church, what you do outside your church, how you care for each other in the church. This is your case for giving, and it should be really concise. I like to say it should fit on a palm card, a 3x5 card, or it's like the elevator pitch idea. So you should be able to tell people why you support your church and what your church does out in the community really concisely, a quick statement. Transparent and accountable finances and leadership. This is really important during stewardship season when we're talking about money, our pledges, where they're going, how our money's being spent. So if you're the kind of congregation that shares its budget on a bulletin board, you may have to think about that when we are gathered virtually. Are you going to post that on a website? Are you going to circulate that? Will you be comfortable emailing it out? We'd like to know always how our money is coming in and how it's going out. And that goes with whatever format you currently use to do your budget. Think about how you might have to do it virtually this year. Always give gratitude and timely acknowledgement of gifts. That's not just the gift pledge as it comes in, but that's every time that people make that gift. If they're doing it electronically, if they're doing it, if they're putting it in the plate or a virtual offering plate, which we'll talk about later, find ways to always be thankful, always hold up giving as one of the things that brings us together and supports the ministry of our community. And always celebrate, give thanks and celebrate. So why do we do this stewardship, and why do we talk about money in church? I want to empower you as stewardship or stewardship committee members or as clergy, and remind you that you can in fact talk about money in church. Jesus, in fact, spent 40% of his time, his parables, about money and possessions. That's a lot of teaching. It's probably because in the first century, just as in the 21st century, what we do with our money, the anxiety we have about our security, they are important to us, and they impact how we are generous and able with our lives. So when I have a conversation with people about their stewardship, whether it's asking someone to join me in making their pledge, or when I do a major gift ask in development and talk about people's relationship with a ministry that I'm trying to get funded, I never have just a conversation about money. What I discover, and it's a joy, is that when we talk about money with each other as Christians, we're talking about so much more. We're talking about people's hopes and dreams. We're talking about their kids going off to school. We're talking about health concerns. We're talking about retirement plans. We're talking about joys and hopes and fears and future and perception in society, right? We attach all that to our money. So expect those pastoral, beautiful, deep, rich conversations to come up when you're talking with your peers and in your congregations about money and about stewardship this year. Before we move on, I'm going to ask if there are any initial questions. Shari, do we have any questions from our people?
There was one question from Van wanting to know if this was the same one you did for TENS on the YouTube video.
Yes, Van, if you've already watched this on the TENS YouTube, you've seen it. If you want to, yes, it is the same. If you want a refresher, stick around. Or if you want to talk with your fellow Diocal folks about what they're doing and hear how our own congregations are doing it, that's another reason to stick around. But yes, if you've already seen it, you've seen it.
Thank you. That's all we have for now.
Great. So I'd like to talk about why your stewardship campaign this year is different from the campaign you ran last year. So as we respond to our local health mandates in our county and also to our own diocese reopening plans, we're going to approach stewardship in a different way than we did last year. Who knows what October and November will look like. We may still be 100% virtually gathered. We may be meeting indoors or outdoors, depending on our reopening plans. What is very likely is that if we do get back into our congregation, into our buildings, it's very likely that some people are going to continue making a choice to stay at home, either because they are immunocompromised or have their own reasons. Maybe they're not ready yet to come back and be in a closed space with people. So as we approach this year, the rest of this year, both in terms of our worship and in terms of our stewardship, we should be prepared for the fact that there are going to be people who aren't meeting in person, who aren't comfortable or ready to meet in person. For that reason, I'm going to suggest throughout this presentation that we think about virtual stewardship campaigns this year and ways to create community virtually. So that means that you should start now, like you are. Thank you for being here at the end of July. This is wonderful. This is when we should be thinking about and forming our stewardship committees, getting our case for giving together, talking with our treasurer about the budget and the budget needs, making sure that our vestry, our bishops committee, and our finance committee have all their pieces in line. And we should begin preparing emails and mail to send out to people. We're probably going to have to use the post and send our materials out. We can't rely on people picking up their envelopes at the back of the church like we normally do. And we should make good use of email. Put these things into PDFs or email attachments that can go out so that people have access to all your materials this year. We're going to talk a little bit later about small groups. And one of the things that you'll hear me say over and over in this presentation and in future ones is that I think we're going to need to develop some small groups, siren going by, city living. We're going to need to invest in some small groups in your congregations to do that work of stewardship. Maybe you do this normally in your stewardship campaign, but we'll talk about some ways to do it virtually this year. And of course, you should always be preaching and teaching on stewardship all year round, but particularly on stewardship in stewardship season. Not just one sermon, but a few. Have some really good conversation and theological education about stewardship. We'll run through some resources later on how to do that. So these small groups that I'm talking about, this year, I think we should really think about how we create community, talking about stewardship, peer-to-peer, small groups, friends meeting. In my church, we like dinners, right? So our stewardship committee or other people always offer to host a dinner in their house, and people come over and talk about why they love church, and they leave with a packet of information. And that's how our stewardship campaign often runs. Well, this year we will not be having dinner parties. We won't be meeting in people's homes. You may have had small groups that meet in other ways in years past. We can't count on that this year, but what we can count on is using Zoom or Facebook Live or the other ways that we've created virtual community in the pandemic to run some small groups. And we're going to talk more about what that process looks like. This is a big slide, but don't worry, you're going to get it in email, so you don't have to furiously take down notes. These are some ideas on how you might run a Bible study in one of these small groups or in a large coffee hour, for example, a Zoom coffee hour, if you do those. These are some great passages that are ready-made for stewardship this year. Obviously, we're in Matthew in our gospel in this year. So if you want to focus on some of the Matthew ones, that's great. But there are plenty of examples throughout Hebrew and Christian scriptures that we can use to jump off on a great small group conversation on Bible study. And what do those look like? So we have a format in mind. Again, you'll get this slide too, so you can adapt it for your own use. But we recommend that you come together in a Bible study around stewardship and you talk, you pray and you gather, you read the scripture. I always like the 3 reading plan in a Bible study. And I like to have 3 different people read it because you get a diversity of voices. You get to hear how people's personal inflections and accents make up the body of Christ and the living word of God. And I also like to look at different translations. So maybe someone's reading from an NIV or an NRSV, or someone's dusted off their old King James. It's nice to hear the word of God in different language and help us understand how the passage moves through us and can be used for our conversations. So this model is one that maybe you're already using in Bible study. It's pretty common. It's also easy for anyone to lead. You don't have to have an MDiv to lead a group like this because it's all generated, it's user-generated content, right? So we are generating our own thoughts as we're going through it. It asks some open-ended questions about what people are reading and how they're responding to it. A couple more slides before we break for some questions. I want to talk about, well, so, you know, we're Episcopalians and the Bible is great and we use the Bible for a lot of things, but not always for conversation starters. So if your congregation also likes to look at articles and poems and songs for inspiration, they are all inspired of God because they're all part of creation. So please use those things. We also have some questions that we've put together that can help you generate or begin a conversation in a small group about stewardship. And it uses the appreciative inquiry model. Appreciative inquiry is something that you may already be familiar with in your professional or in your congregational context. It's a way of thinking or developing ideas that focuses on what's possible, what's good, what's exciting. It intentionally does not ask or frame negative questions or problems. So that's to say, it asks for us to be our best selves. It does allow for problems to come up or questions. So it's not about groupthink. You don't have to have a right answer in appreciative inquiry, but it's about starting the question asking from a positive, proactive, beautiful place and seeing where ideas come from. So I like some of these questions, and I've used them in various small groups and been a part of small groups where they're used before. They work really well, asking people what's most exciting to them about the congregation, what you'd do if money were no object, what ministries you'd start, just to start to unlock some of those beautiful ideas that we have. Always looking at our community neighbors, our other churches, community nonprofits in the neighborhood. What are they doing to serve their people and their constituents in their neighborhoods? That's a good way for us to see what we might do in our congregations to serve those communities as well. And then, of course, what are the gifts that you're most excited to share with your community? This is a really beautiful stewardship question, because it's not just about check writing or money giving. It's about all the things that we're willing to do, from sweeping and yard work to sewing and cooking to lending our advice or our consultancy on various projects. We have so many gifts to give to our congregations, and we'd like to think of it that way and share those gifts with our community. This is the last slide in this section that I want to talk about, and it's probably the most controversial one. So what I'm recommending this year is that the hosts of these small groups, and maybe you have met with people 2 or 3 times, you've done a Bible study, you've done a topical study, you've looked at the budget together in your small group. I'm suggesting that the hosts of these meetings make the ask. Now, that's not to say I'm asking you, Davey, for a specific amount of money and tell me what it is. It's to say, I've made my gift, or I'm making my gift to the church this year. Will you join me in making a gift this year? It's a way to make sure that they're enrolled in that stewardship process. And they can say anything. They can say, I'm praying about it. They can say, yes, I will. They can say, I'm not ready yet. Last year, when I had my stewardship dinner, it was a beautiful moment in that conversation where we talked about what we were going to do this year. There were 2 people at the table who had big life changes. And so they were able to say, with the support of us, that they were changing their giving and they weren't able to give what they gave last year, and do it in an environment where they felt supported and loved. Nobody said, oh, why aren't you? Or you can give till it hurts. Nobody said that to them, right? We said, wow, you're doing great things, or you've had a beautiful life, or this is where you're going with what you need. And we're supportive of that. So I say that to say the moment in which we invite people to make their gifts and ask them how they might participate can be really beautiful conversations, peer to peer, friend to friend, Christian to Christian. And those are holy, sacred moments. Do we have any questions on these small groups before we move on to some other best practices?
No questions at this moment.
You guys are all pros at small groups. I'm glad to hear it. I hope that you'll use them this year. I hope that you'll use these processes. We're going to have another webinar later in August that drills deeply down into how you can use these for virtual communities. And we're going to just talk about the virtual communities.
Excuse me, Davey, we have one question.
Yeah.
How small is small? How many people?
Oh, that's a great question. I think that especially virtually, you need at least 5 or 6 people to have a good conversation. And if you get above 12, it's probably becoming unmanageable. Now, if you are the kind of congregation that doesn't have enough volunteers to run enough groups, or you have a huge congregation and you need larger groups, you can certainly do it. But I find that 12 is probably about the upper size for people to be able to create a vulnerable, beautiful space in which they can share and all have time to be heard and to speak. Any more than that, and you start making people feel rushed.
Okay, I have some questions, more questions coming up. But I also, somebody said somebody's trying to get in the room and I don't have anybody in the waiting room. So I'm not sure what's, and then Jeff said some have no computers, how to reach them.
So that's an ongoing problem that we're going to have as we gather virtually, right? So I understand as we've been doing virtual worship for several months now, that it doesn't include everyone, and that's really a hard thing. So this year in our stewardship, we're going to have to find ways to include people who even do not have the technology at home to do it. If they have a smartphone, they can access all the same sorts of tools that they're using, that you would use a desktop for. So if they have a smartphone but not a laptop or a desktop, they can access Zoom or Facebook Live or Google Hangouts on that. It'll just be a very much smaller screen. There's also the good old telephone. So Zoom and other programs, especially Zoom, will allow people to call in. So they may not be able to, you may not be able to see their face, but they'll be able to hear everything that's said, and they'll be able to talk on the phone and be heard. So that's a way to include people if you're using Zoom. People can always call in. It's a really good way to do it. Obviously, mail. So if they can't receive email, then you'll have to make sure that pledge forms and pledge materials are mailed out to households, and that there's a way for them to turn their pledge forms back in.
Okay, we have a question from Anne. How are the groups formed? Who assigns?
I would say, so sometimes it's about first, how many people want to volunteer to host a group? If that's your stewardship committee or all of your vestry or bishops committee, or if you have other people, right? So you have a list of people who are willing to host. And then I've done this process where you just kind of look at the church directory and say, do we divide it up alphabetically? Do we take the people that we know well and see how those names shake out? Or is it more methodical? A stewardship chair might say, I want to put a new pledging family with some families that have been pledging for a long time. There could be some strategy about that, and you could assign the groups. Davey is with Shari, and they're going to talk and whatever. So I would say that it's up to you on how to do it. I like groups that sort of form organically. And so maybe taking a look at those people who are already connected to have those groups. But if you want to mix them up and be more strategic about it, and you know various criteria on why that helps, you can form your groups that way.
Okay, we have a question from Michelle. If you have a model where you ask for a percentage gift already, is there a way to invite the small group leader to ask a percentage gift?
Right. So a lot of times when we think about our stewardship, we think about it in terms not of gift size, but about percentage of your income. That's or in a percent increase. That's a way that we can help people feel open and included. They can find their own number in that. I always like that. So, this year we're asking everyone to look at their giving and increase this much if you can, right? We'll talk later about the year that we're in, right? And not everybody can increase their giving this year. So think about it that way. I also, if your stewardship materials talk about percentage giving, I know that there are pledge cards that exist. In fact, I'll be recommending one later that you can sort of find your income on one column and what that percentage goes out. So if you're the kind of person that says, I give 1% of my income, we can help you calculate that easily and people can do that gift. I like percentage-based giving. It's an easy way to do it.
And then the last question is, what about people who have computer access but are a little bit technology adverse?
So yeah, I mean, um, I would ask, the first question is, how are they doing with virtual worship right now? So are they able to and feel comfortable gathering on your Sunday service or your weekday services or your coffee hours? If they're comfortable doing that, then they may be okay with a stewardship process that's virtual this year. If they're not okay with that, then again, reaching out to them individually to include them in stewardship. And that may be phone calls, that may be other ways where the stewardship chair or someone on the stewardship committee says, hey, Davey, we'd love to hear from you. We're doing all these small groups, but if you can't participate, we'd still like to talk to you about your giving and what you're doing this year or how you're feeling about it. So more one-on-one conversations. We can't solve everybody's technology issues. We can just do what we can for the biggest number of people. And that's kind of just how technology works. We can make it as personal as we can, but there are some people who are not able to or won't adopt it. They're really going to have a problem with the next section that I talk about, which is the online giving platforms and ways to give money online. So technology plays a part, and we are in relationship with technology. I'm not suggesting that we blow that question off. It's very personal for some people.
Okay, that was all the questions.
Great. Before we look at some of our virtual offering plates, I want to talk a little bit about TENS, the Episcopal Network for Stewardship, and I want to talk about some liturgical resources that have been created for use in Episcopal churches. So during the stewardship season from St. Francis Sunday through Christ the King, TENS offers a weekly meditation, and that is it ties in with the readings of the day and has a theologically based stewardship approach to what those readings are. It's a great way to do some sermon prep, to host a forum. You can use it as a jumping off place in a forum or a small group. Each of those weekly inserts, which can be emailed out with your bulletin or however you want to distribute them, those come with a couple of discussion questions, so they can be used by your small groups or by a large group. The Diocese of California is a member of TENS, the Episcopal Network for Stewardship, and so therefore all of you have access, all the access to the TENS materials. They are free, they are downloadable, and I'll share that address with you many times in the chat and at the end of this presentation. I want to talk a little bit about the offertory. So I love this cartoon, and it's one of those great ones that comes on your church pension group calendar. You know, show me the money is not one of the approved offertory sentences. So what do we do during the offertory? I've been attending a whole lot of virtual worship since March. And I love them because it's a great chance to see friends across the country, the living body of Christ gathered in the ways that we can. One of the things I have noticed is that the offertory, which when we are gathered in normal times, is such a high point of the service. There's movement, gifts, plates are passed, music is performed, we stand as the gifts come down the aisle, the gifts of our labor, but also the bread and the wine, the elements of communion, those come down, and maybe we sing the doxology, right? There's a ritual around the offertory. And I found that in our virtual worship services, not every community is doing the offertory in the same way. There are no plates to be passed. There is no procession of the elements because they're sitting on the credence table. If your congregation is doing a Eucharist at all, or a spiritual communion of sorts. So that moment, that ritual that we have created where we celebrate our giving and our gifts doesn't happen. So I'm going to make some suggestions about some offertory sentences and then some ways that we can think about the offertory moment intentionally in stewardship as we are gathered virtually. So you'll get this slide. You don't have to write these down now if you're interested in them. But my very good friend, Kay Sylvester from the Diocese of Los Angeles, wrote a few new offertory sentences that can be used, and she's given permission for us to use them if we want. These are great ways just to reframe that sentence that we usually use to stop the talking at announcements or at the peace, and really create that holy moment of the offertory. So please use these and add to them. Some best practices for our virtual offertory. So as we do stewardship season virtually this year, I'm asking that we intentionally gather. We are not passing a virtual offering plate, but we can pause and invite people to make their gift online as they normally would. If they're using an application, if they're using a link, if they're doing their giving that way, I think it's a great way just to honor that moment that normally we would be doing with plates. And then I would say some congregations I've seen are taking, for example, the envelopes that they receive throughout the week that have people's weekly pledges. There are still people sending in checks. That's great. We like checks. And they take them and just the empty envelopes and they put them in a basket and they hold it up and they say, look, this is representative of what's come in this week. These are our gifts, living and celebrated. I think that virtually we should bless the gifts that have been offered, either in that moment electronically or that have come in or will come in. So take that moment and bless the giving that's happening. And then break our gifts, share them with the world. This is a great time to remind us of the ministries that our gifts support, and have that moment, that intentional sacred moment as we are at the table, to say, this is what we're doing with our giving. This is the ministries that, that we are supporting as a community. So a little wrap up about virtual stewardship campaigns before we move in to looking at some online platforms. So this year, select the technology that you'll use for your virtual offering plate. And that what I'm suggesting is that you use the time now, if you haven't already, to make sure that people have a way to give money online, make pledges online, and fulfill those gifts online. Many times, these businesses take a couple days to set up, so a few business days, and they'll need your treasurer or your bank account information to do that. So make sure you have the right people in place. It does take a little time. It can take a week. So if you're hoping to implement it next Sunday, it's not probably going to happen, but it can happen in a couple Sundays. So think about that, select your technology, and we're going to help you with a few suggestions. And I'm always open to helping you brainstorm others. Whatever platform you're currently using for your virtual church service, you should use for stewardship. And I suggest that because people are used to it by now. So if you're using Zoom, if you're using Facebook Live, if you're using Google Hangouts, then please use them for your stewardship small groups or your stewardship forums or your celebrations or your kickoffs. Use your technology for those things. Some people wonder about the necessity to log in if you use some of these services. Zoom requires no login, so you don't have to be a member of anything. All you have to do is have the link and you can get in. Facebook Live, you don't have to have a Facebook account. You just have to have the link in order to view Facebook Live. But if you want to be commenting and typing things in, you do have to have a Facebook account. Google Hangout is the same. So you must have a Gmail account to use it. Gmail accounts are free, but if you have people who don't want to have a Gmail account, then Google Hangout is not going to be the place together. Again, I'm just running through the best practices for your virtual campaign this year. Develop your case, develop it now. Do your collateral if you're bringing together pie charts and pictures and budgets and testimonials and stories. Spend time now gathering it and laying it out and creating it so that it can be sent through the mail and can be sent electronically. Download the free TENS resources to use for virtual campaigns. This includes a timeline and an instruction sheet on how to form some small groups. It also includes all of the liturgical resources and the weekly meditations to help focus your campaign. Select leaders to facilitate your small groups. So do that now, enroll them in the process. Your stewardship committee should be forming and starting to talk about stewardship this year. And you can use this presentation as a jumping off place. I suggest that everybody be enrolled in up to 3 virtual stewardship conversations. We've talked about what they could be, like a review of the budget, a Bible study or a topical conversation, and then that moment when the invitation to join the campaign happens. So at least 3, you can do more. You can have large groups or small groups, as we've discussed, but I suggest that you try to enroll everyone in at least 3. Not everyone's going to be able to make every meeting, we know that. Just try. And then make sure that you find a way to celebrate and acknowledge and thank. I was speaking this morning with a rector in Akron, Ohio, who was lamenting the fact that this year they won't be able to gather at a parishioner's house after their campaign is over. And she usually has everyone in the church over, and it's this big catered do, and everybody has a great time and they love it. And they're not going to be able to do that this year. And so what they're doing to celebrate the end of their campaign is they're using the same catering service, but people are going to go and pick up their bag of lunch and take it back to their house and have it on Zoom together. So they'll be able to celebrate the end of their campaign in a way that they're used to by gathering and eating and celebrating the moment, but they know that they won't be able to do it in a house or with a large group. They found a way to do it in a small group where they can still have the same thing. Those sorts of moments are going to need more thought this year as we think through how our fall stewardship will go virtually. Any questions about our best practices?
Shelley has a question, and she would like to know if the servant keeper supports online stewardship.
If what's that?
The servant keeper?
Servant keeper. It's a great one. So you're maybe using it for your newsletter, or you may be using it for your directory. They do have some giving options where you can run your campaign through it. I believe it's not one of the ones that I'm going to review later, but I believe Servant Keeper will do a campaign for you at an add-on fee. So if you're already paying a setup fee to have used it, Servant Keeper will add on the process of a campaign for you.
That's it for now.
Okay, thank you. Let's talk about virtual offering plates. In COVID times and in non-COVID times, I recommend that every congregation invest in and investigate how people can make gifts online. For the plate, in those times when we are passing the plate, Many people do not carry cash any longer. If I come into your church, I have the same dusty $1 bills in my wallet that I've had for months because I don't use cash very often. I use my debit card for everything, or my Apple Pay or something like that. That's me, but that's a lot of people. And so in the times when we can pass a plate, if you don't have a way for people to give online, you're losing that gift. You're leaving that money in people's purses or in their wallet. Even in healthy times, and now certainly post-COVID or during the pandemic, we are so aware of how our touch communicates more than just our good feelings, but it communicates germs. So we're thinking about what we do to pass things in, what will the peace look like? Will we be shaking hands? Will we be passing offering plates? I think it's for us to think through. For pledges, many online virtual offering plates offer the ability to make recurring gifts, and many donors rely on this for maybe giving to other nonprofits. If they support people in the life cycle, if they give to their YMCA or to their Sierra Club, they might be making recurring gifts online to do that. Well, why not with church? And there are plenty of ways that software exists to do that. I know because I was a part of a vestry, a bishop's committee, and had treasurers and finance committees who really pushed back for a long time on electronic giving because it does come with a cost. Those transaction costs have to be paid by someone. And if it's the church, it comes out of the gift. And if it's the donor, it comes out of their pocket. It's also the way that the world is going, and making or allowing people to make gifts online comes with some costs. And it's up to every congregation to figure out what they're willing to do and how they're willing to engage that. So what about people who really like cash and checks? So just because I'm all about virtual offering plates doesn't mean that I'm suggesting we stop offering conventional ways to accept money in church. Please, yes, allow people to write checks. Some people prefer using their bank's bill pay system or transfer system to make gifts to the church. And those come out at whatever rate you want them to, monthly or weekly or with your paycheck or whatever. And it has no fee usually to the user. The church gets a paper check. That's a great way to regularize giving and give people yet another way to make their gifts and make their pledges. Mobile giving is yet another way that some congregations are doing this. And so that's using your cell phone. There may be an app on it, or you may do text to give. We'll talk a little bit about what those are like in the next section. Keep in mind that different generations give in different ways. Your millennial and your Gen Z donors, they do have money to give to churches, and they will be happy using virtual and app-based giving to make those gifts. It's not for everyone, but it is for some people. Some of you have heard about Venmo, and maybe your congregation uses it. I use Venmo when I want to pay my friend back for buying the movie tickets or whatever. It's a great way to transfer money back and forth, and it's instantaneous. As of January, Venmo is no longer accepting new applications for nonprofits or churches. It was a way that some churches were using to gather money online. And that's because it was purchased by PayPal, and PayPal would like you to use PayPal to do that. So they are no longer supporting it. What that means is if you were already set up on Venmo, you can continue using it. It will go away sometime, but for now, you can use it, but there are no new applications. The bottom line Offer as many ways as you can to fulfill pledges and receive gifts. This is to say, offer as many ways as your treasurer can keep track of and not go insane. Offer as many ways as you are comfortable as a congregation offering, because what you don't want is to force people into one particular system. We do this a lot in church, I find. You know, we use a system, somebody set it up and we're still using it, and other systems have come and gone. And maybe there is some benefit into the new things that come along every once in a while. So what I'm suggesting is that we make this donor centric. That is to say, many people are using many different kinds of ways to make gifts online. So why not offer checks? Why not offer bank checks? Why not offer an app-based thing like Tithely? Why not have PayPal? Why not use all of these things so that you can give people a variety of ways to make their gifts online and bring money into your church and make it easier. It's also easier for visitors to come and make those gifts online. Pick platforms that integrate well with your accounting software. Almost all the ones I'll be talking about now integrate very easily with QuickBooks or FileMaker Pro if you're using that. So they're already kind of integrated, and you can run reports really easily and integrate the systems. Some of the systems are a little bit more proprietary, and so ask your treasurer, is this a good one for us to use? Will it interface? Will it be easy? What you don't want is to make it overwhelming or unwieldy for your treasurer. Before we talk about common virtual offering plates, I wanted to ask if there are any questions in general about offering plates.
There's one from Marge. She wants to know, what service do you recommend for mobile giving since Venmo is not available?
Great. Well, we're on the page right now for PayPal. It's a great way. Many people have the PayPal app on their phone. We'll be talking about Tithely. Tithely is another app-based giving program that you set up and you interface with your own bank account, and you can make gifts specifically to churches or church-related charities. And then there's Zelle. That's another one that we'll be talking about today. Zelle works with big banks usually. And if your church has a big bank and you participate with a big bank, Zelle is sort of already integrated in your online banking. But there are lots of other ways that we'll talk about in a minute. Well, let's talk about PayPal. So you may use PayPal already to do some online purchasing or to make gifts online. PayPal is a great system. It's very easy to use. It's got wide trust in the marketplace and great brand recognition. It has pretty unfriendly back-end support, which is to say that your treasurer will get the name, the email address, and the amount, but not a whole lot of other like contact information other than the email. So if you're the kind of person that likes to get a really robust report on the kind of gifts that come in, PayPal gives you the bare bones. The plus side is it's one of the least expensive. It only charges 2.2% per transaction, and then another 30 cents per transaction. So let's talk about what a transaction cost is. You're probably already familiar with it, but if you're not, an online payment system charges a little fee to be the bank that processes your payment and sends it on to your church. So in this case, PayPal takes 2.2% of the transaction for themselves, and they send the rest on to the church. They do that because it's the way that they make money, and because that's how this transaction works. So that's for Discover cards, MasterCards, and Visas. Amex usually negotiates a different rate, and it's usually a little higher with Amex, depends. And so, but this is the transaction rate for what most people use for giving: Visa, MasterCard, Discover. That's PayPal. Easy Tithe is another app-based, it works both on phones and on websites. So you can integrate it with your church website. You can integrate it with your giving. It's really easy to use. It has a really good back-end support, so you can get great reporting from it. And it's free to set up. It has a transaction cost, as you see, about 3%, and then 39 cents per gift. So that's a little higher than PayPal. And one of the great things about Easy Tithe, like the question earlier about Servant Keeper, is that you can add on some other great features, and each of them will cost a setup fee to do. But if you want to include streaming services, so not using Zoom or Facebook or YouTube, but you want to use a different kind, they have a streaming service that's embedded. You can do event registration. So if you're the kind of congregation that sells tickets to like a gala, you can use your Easy Tithe to do that kind of stuff really easily. You can record sermons, you can play them back. All those different add-ons are fees, but they are made for churches, and so they're trying to make it easy. I'm going to go through a couple of these offering plates, and then I'll stop and ask for questions about any of them or others. Faith Street is a really great one. A lot of congregations are using it. They are out in a lot of dioceses. It's a really good online and app-based system to use. It also includes add-ons for text to give and campaigns within campaigns. So campaigns within campaigns, what I mean by that is if you want to also, in addition to your stewardship, if you want to be able to collect money for your flower guild or your youth trip or your special collection, you can run those campaigns within your campaign. So as somebody is making their Sunday morning gift, they can say, here's my pledge, here's my flower gift, here's my whatever. So you can run those kinds of campaigns. They are set up for the way a lot of churches run their giving. This is one of the systems that you can switch on to allow the donor to absorb the transaction cost. And that means that the donor gets a choice between increasing their gift to cover the amount of the transaction. You may have seen this on donation sites already, or not, in which case the church picks it up. The monthly fee for Faith Street is $42 a month for the church to just use it. And then there's a 3.5% transaction and 30 cents per gift. Push pay is a really expensive option, but it's really good. In a way, this is you get what you pay for. Short of having Razor's Edge or another sort of CRM or CMS system in your church giving, PushPay is a really good system. It stands alone. So it allows you to collect donation online and mobile. It has a lot of the relationship management pieces, so you can put in things that just the pastor can see, things that just the stewardship people can see, things that just the treasurer can see and make notes. So there are a lot of levers you can pull within the app or the system that make it customizable and better for kind of large scale fundraising. It's really expensive though. So it can be $500 to $1,250 to set up. It's a lot of money. And then depending on how much volume you do, your transaction rate goes down. So if you're doing a lot of giving, you get the cheaper transaction rate. If you're doing less giving, your transaction rate goes up. Giving Tools is yet another virtual platform. This is another one that allows you to do campaigns within campaigns. For your congregation, if you really do collect money for flowers and you use those flower envelopes or whatever, this is the way to do that virtually. So think about that. It also has a monthly fee, and the more you pay per month, the lower the transaction cost for your donors. So that's how you get the better rate there. Zelle, I said earlier, it's designed, paid for by large banks, for large banks. It leaves out many community banks and credit unions. It's a way to transfer money person to person to organization. All you need is sort of an email address and some bank account information on your end, and you can zing money to people. You don't get a whole lot of information on the organization side about who gave what. You get their name, you get their cell phone number, maybe you'll get their email address if they've chosen to put it in, but you get the name they choose to put in. So if I put Donald Duck, that's what you'll hear or see. And so it's not super useful in Zelle, but it is free. And so that's good for some people. It's free to use, but your own bank may charge a fee, so you'll have to check on that. Tithely is one that I talk about a lot, and I talk about it because everyone in the Diocese of California who wants to use it gets a discount because you're a member of the Episcopal Network for Stewardship. So that means that it's on your phone. You can do mobile giving, you can do recurring gifts, you can do your whole pledge campaign on Tithely, and you get a pretty good discount on the transaction costs and on the text to give. This is also one of the systems where the donor can opt to cover the transaction costs themselves. Finally, I want to talk about Facebook. Facebook has its own donation platform. You may have seen it in the past couple of years when people have a birthday and they want people to donate to a cause. Facebook has its own payment processing system. Well, during the COVID-19 pandemic, they are not taking any transaction costs to use that. So if you are a congregation that's doing its virtual worship service on Facebook Live, and you want to have a Facebook donation link in the comment section of your news feed or your church feed, it's all set up for you. All you have to do is create that. It's really easy. You can add a button to your church's Facebook page to give, or your website, and it'll use the Facebook. Right now, it's not charging a fee. I don't know how long that's going to last. They've committed through the pandemic. So I don't know what that will actually mean. And if they will go back to charging a fee one day. They may, or they may decide that they're doing a pretty good thing right now and want to keep it that way. That's my roundup of some of the most common virtual offering plates. And I wonder what questions you may have about the ones I've talked about, or ones that you're using, or any questions about virtual offering plates.
So I have a question and I have a couple comments. Jeff and Ann Roberts, they said that Giving Tool is offering their services to Episcopal churches for free for the rest of this year.
I've heard that. That's great. So yeah, no setup fee with Giving Tools. So that's really great. No monthly fee. The transaction cost is still there. So donors will still have to pay for their gift, but the church doesn't have to pay that monthly fee.
And then Ron wants to know how he could encourage his givers to cover the transaction cost in addition to intended amount of gift.
So it's just that transparent. So, you can do the math for them. Davey gives $100 to his church, and it's a 3% transaction. That means his church only gets $97. If he wants to give his church a whole 100, then he's got to give 103. And you just spell that out for donors. Help them understand that the transaction cost for the church is a cost of doing business, but because you love the church and because you don't want the church to take a hit on this transaction, you're offering to cover it. When you're making a really large gift, 3% of something really large can be a large amount, right? So there are some reasons why you would ask a donor to say, if they're already willing to make a large gift, to cover that. That's a big hit if you're giving not $100, but $1,000, and you're taking 3% of it. Now we're starting to talk about $30 off of that gift, and that may make a difference to some people. So just being transparent with them and inviting them to do it. Also, it's not a hard sell, right? So, the church doesn't get the whole gift, but you're not making people feel bad or making people feel less than if they choose not to cover the cost of it. It's part of doing the business. Doing the business of online giving, I should say.
Yeah, and Anne made the reference of saying that some nonprofits ask you to do that as part of the solicitation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some nonprofits are really good at it because nonprofits, unlike Episcopal churches, are better at talking about money. So they just say it. This will help us out, and it works the same in congregations, right? You just let people know this will greatly ease our burden. We'll get the full amount of your gift. You want the full amount of your gift to go to your church. So if you can, and you're able to increase your gift just by those extra few dollars, please do. It will really help us.
Great, that's it for that section.
Great. This concludes most of what I wanted to say, but now I just really wanted to open it up to you to answer any questions you might have about virtual giving or the resources. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can all go back to seeing each other. And I'm going to put the information about how to access free resources and upcoming webinars in the chat. So please, there we go. A number of things there. I've put in the link to how you can get free resources from TENS, including the username and password that you'll need. And I've also included a survey, which I really hope you will fill out. It'll help me create more webinars that have content that you want. So what else can I help you with? What other answers can I give you today? Now we're all here. Yeah, Helen, you can unmute yourself and.
I was just going to make two quick comments. One, Network for Giving. Many people have heard of Network for Giving. They come right out on the page that you put your pledge. They come right out and ask you to pay the fee.
Yep, they do. Network for Good, right?
Network for Good, yes.
Yep. They have a little toggle and they say, please do it. And you, the person who's creating that form, can select whether the toggle is toggled or not. And so people have to make that choice. Yeah.
And the other thing, when we think in terms of time, talent, and treasure, someone mentioned that many.
Yeah.
You can still hear me?
I hear you.
I can't see anybody anymore, but that doesn't matter.
Oh.
I was just thinking, you spoke about people that aren't maybe computer literate, might need some help. Perhaps a gift of someone's time and talent could be to volunteer to help people who don't know how to use Zoom or don't have it. You know, it's free if you have a computer. that might be a community building volunteer opportunity.
Yeah, it's a great idea, Helen. I know that when we started doing virtual services, for example, there were a group of Gen Z kids from Transfiguration who were doing phone calls with their parishioners and walking them through, this is how you get on Zoom. This is, really like hit this button. And there was this amazing intergenerational moment between these people who may not actually talk in church much, but there they were on the phone with each other, like educating. So yeah, there are people who are tech savvy in your congregation. Ask them to help out people who are less familiar with the resources.
Davey, Shelley would like to know if the fees are tax deductible to the donor.
Shari, I think you can answer that question better than I.
I think they are, but let me check into that and I'll have Davey get back to you, Shelley. I'm sorry.
I think they are. I think you can just lump it in.
Yes.
Because it's ultimately money that you are paying and you're not getting a good or a service for it.
Right, because it's our fees for doing it, so it's right.
Yeah, Ron, I see your hand.
Thanks, Davey. Great presentation, by the way. It's a really great presentation. I have a comment and I have a question. The comment, first of all, I want to go back to the point in the presentation where you talked about the offertory and about that we maybe can learn some new ways to celebrate that were easier during a pre-COVID time. I'm visiting a different parish in Diocese, a different congregation in Diocese every Sunday. That's part of what I'm doing during the pandemic. I was at St. Ambrose last weekend. I'll be at Christ the Lord this Sunday. Nice. And I'm seeing a wide range of how the offertory is treated in the bulletin, in the leaflet. There are some congregations where there's virtually no mention other than the word offering or offertory, and then in others, and several of that I've attended, I'm not going to name names here, but several congregations have done some things that are very, very thoughtful and very creative. And so I'm seeing a few rectors on here, not a lot, but it may be worth considering what kind of verbiage we decide, being thoughtful about what to put in that section. We're very, very thoughtful about all the other places in liturgy. We might want to be more thoughtful about how we highlight that part of the service, so that during a virtual service, we have every bit as we have to overcome what we have by now being able to meet face to face. The other thing is a question, Davey, as you know, because you know me well, I'm always in stewardship. I'm always interested in how we can link stewardship with planned giving. And I'm wondering, in a virtual environment and going into a stewardship campaign, is there a way to do that with virtual tools? Can we invite people to be thinking about planned giving as a part of their annual giving, in a way that the two are connected, and what kind of how would we do that virtually and effectively?
That's a great question. And you're right. We should always ask for a planned gift or let people know that planned giving is an option. The lowest possible touch for that is to put a little checkbox on your pledge card and say, I'm interested in hearing more. At least it plants the seed and it can start a conversation. It's a longer conversation on how to wrap it into a stewardship campaign, but I've seen it done really successfully where the material is just side by side. You've made your pledge. You're not ready to commit today perhaps to a planned gift, but here's the information. Would you like to learn more? Let's open up a conversation, and it's a hand in hand, you know, give now and give later kind of conversation. Amanda Martin, who was our planned giving officer for many years at the diocese, is still consulting with us. And so Amanda and I are going to run a couple of webinars in September and October specifically about planned giving, how to, you know, get our legacy societies up and running virtually, and how to do a combined stewardship ask for planned giving and stewardship. So stay tuned. We'll be having yet more webinars.
Okay, Shelley would like to know if he's comfortable sharing which churches we can learn from.
Ah, Ron. Who's on your good list? You're muted.
Well, I want to give, I'm not going to give a long list of names, but I do want to highlight, I was at Resurrection in Pleasant Hill maybe 3 or 4 weeks, about a month ago or so. And I was very impressed with what they did. And so, you know, you could just probably go to their website and download the leaflet for any Sunday that's there, and I'm sure it's the same for the Sunday coming up. It's just simply, without bringing it up, it's probably not a portion of the entire service that one tends to think about highlighting. It's, you know, it's the offering. We pass the plate and you know, and we move on. But it's just in the context of this conversation, in the context of how do we adapt ourselves? How do we pivot from face-to-face worship and virtual worship? We have to think consciously about how we do that for our giving of money as well, and how we invite that and make it more. You know, a lot of people. I actually had a friend of mine at the beginning of the pandemic saying, well, what are people in churches doing? Well, why do you need to keep, you know, paying your pledge, because they've got nothing to do now that they're closed? And I mean, they're I guess, believe it or not, they're still, you know, we still need to say we have expenses going on here, and we need to offer that in a Christian, in the spirit of Christian asking.
Yes, thank you.
Davey.
Hi, Lois. Good to see you.
Hey. So you started off my campaign last year with an amazing sermon. I'm wondering, will people like you or the diocese offer us a video sermon so that we get to see a different face, hear a different voice towards stewardship? Is anything in plan maybe to help us do something like that?
Certainly. I'll be recording a couple sermons during the October-November season and setting them out, and you can use them on a given Sunday. So I will, I haven't decided which ones I'm going to do yet. Maybe we can talk if you have a particular one you'd like me to do. I'll be recording a couple videos and they can be used. If you want me to drop, if you're using Facebook Live and you want me to drop into your Facebook, I'm happy to do that too, and keep the sermon going.
Yeah, we're trying a bunch of different ways. We're trying to figure out what works best for us, but I will be looking forward to that.
Great.
Thank
you. I'm cognizant of our time. We're coming up. We have got about 10 minutes left before 5:30, which is when we officially end, and you may have dinner or other things to do. Are there other questions out there? Anything we can help answer? I'm going to pop all of the resources I've talked about in the chat again. So remember that all the resources that TENS offers are free for you because you're members of the diocese and we are members of TENS. I'm asking you if there are other webinars that you might like to join. So there's a link there to see what webinars are coming up in August. that might be really exciting to you. Drill down on some of the topics. Today was a real broad overview. And then also, if you wouldn't mind answering a 3-question survey, I promise it will only take 2 minutes. It'll help me develop better webinars, and you can also tell me which topics you really want to hear about, and then we can do it for you. We hope that you have a really successful, good stewardship campaign this year, and that you can adapt to our virtual world with stewardship. Keep in mind that, like everything in the pandemic, it takes a little longer, and it's going to need a little bit of intentional thought. So as you go forward, take the time, be intentional, develop your committee and your theology, and be ready to go with your stewardship season this year. I will send this recording and this PowerPoint out following the call. I'll send it to the email list. When you registered, you sent me your email address, so I will use that to send this out to all of you. So expect an email from me really soon as soon as it uploads into YouTube, which takes a while, I will send it off to you. Last call for questions.
Thank you, Davey. This has been really great.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you, Davey.
Thank you, friends.
Thank you, Davey.
Thank
So
you.
good to see friends and people. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Blessings.
Thank you.
For,
This is helpful.
thank you. I'm glad. Blessings for abundance on your campaign. Let me know how I can help you. I am a resource, not just virtually, but all the time. And I'm ready to help. Thank you, friends. We'll see you another time.